This is a Fox News alert. I'm Chris Wallace in for Bret Baier. Islamic State militants say another American hostage has died. But this time they are pointing the finger at Jordan for dropping a bomb during an airstrike yesterday they say killed Kayla Mueller. Officials both here in the U.S. and in Jordan say they cannot confirm the claim. We have Fox team coverage. Shepard Smith is in Amman, Jordan tonight, where the campaign against ISIS is expanding. But we begin with Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry and the search for answers about an American aid worker. Good evening, Ed.
Good evening, Chris. She worked in Syrian hospitals trying to help people, but was kidnapped by ISIS. Her possible death puts new pressure on the president tonight as he unveils an updated national security strategy already under fire. For the first time ever, we're seeing Kayla Mueller. Her family allowed us to use this image as they confirm the 26-year-old Arizona woman is being held hostage by ISIS. Today, the Islamic militants claimed the young aid worker was killed after Jordanian fighter planes bombed a building where she was being held. Jordanian officials dismissed that as propaganda, while State Department spokeswoman Marie Harf said they're deeply concerned about Mueller, but are simply not sure of her fate.
I cannot confirm those reports in any way.
Do you know?
Obviously, people are looking into them, but cannot confirm them.
Mueller would be the fourth American hostage to die while in the hands of ISIS in a matter of months. And U.S. officials say there are an unspecified number of more American hostages being held abroad. This is the president's national security advisor, Susan Rice, unveiled a new national security blueprint that classified climate change as a threat while downplaying concerns about terror.
While the dangers we face may be more numerous and varied, they are not of the existential nature we confronted during World War II or during the Cold War. We cannot afford to be buffeted by alarmism and a nearly instantaneous news cycle.
Republicans quickly mocked the stated goal of strategic patience at the end of a week where ISIS burned a Jordanian hostage alive.
They have a worldwide plan for domination, and we don't have a worldwide plan to deal with them.
And even as she talked down alarmism, Rice warned about the strong possibility of more terror attacks as she struggled to square previous claims that al-Qaeda was on the run and ISIS was the JV squad with recent terror attacks by simply claiming the threat has evolved and diffused.
As al-Qaeda core has been decimated, we've seen the diffusion of the threat to al-Qaeda affiliates, ISIL, local militia, and homegrown violent extremists. This diffusion may, for now, reduce the risk of a spectacular attack like 9/11, but it raises the probability of the types of attacks that we have seen in Boston and Ottawa, Sydney, and Paris.
As Rice again avoided using the term Islamic extremism, so did Vice President Biden in Brussels.
Well, both Europe and the United States face the threat, as you mentioned, of violent extremism.
A threat so real that now a Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee is urging the president and his team to finally call out Islamic extremism.
When you look at 99% of the terrorist attacks that have been conducted around the world over the last 15 years, there's one element that's in common, that they've all been fueled by and motivated by and conducted by these radical Islamic extremists. And in order to defeat that threat, we have to identify it and then come up with an effective strategy then to defeat it and get rid of it.
Now, Senator Jeff Flake of Kayla's home state of Arizona says she should be remembered for helping people, and the best way for Congress to honor her is to pass a new authorization of the mission to finally defeat ISIS. Chris?
Ed Henry reporting from the White House tonight. Ed, thanks. Let's get more reaction now on the ground in Jordan. My colleague Shepard Smith is in Amman again tonight. Hello, Shep.
Hello, Chris. Here they are denouncing exactly that entire claim and saying that, in fact, it's nothing but propaganda. For her part, Kayla Mueller went to Syria after being in Turkey to try to help out children. She said she was siding with the people of Syria against its government in their own civil war. She said all along all she wanted to do was help kids. And then, in August of 2013, ISIS kidnapped her. Months later, we got a proof of life video in an email, but since then, nothing. Many analysts believe she may have been dead for quite some time. And as for the claim that Jordanian fighter pilots might have killed her somehow in a strike today, the information minister says, why should we believe them?
We in Jordan have a story actually that just concluded. Daesh and ISIS have been negotiating our pilot, though they have killed the pilot almost a month ago. So there is no reason for us to believe their new propaganda. We think this is part of what they are intending to do in order to make probably a fraction in the coalition. But I think everybody can see that game and highly suspicious of that story.
Part of a media campaign rollout to hear it from the Jordanians. Of course, they're checking into these claims, but they have no reason to believe them. As for the Jordanians, they launched many strikes today. They sent video from the Pentagon of 24 Jordanian fighter jets as they flew over areas in Syria. They, of course, hit a munitions dump, but the Jordanian authorities say the chances that they would have hit her are infinitesimal, Chris.
Shep, I understand the people there expressed their outrage after Friday prayers today.
They did. There was the Queen was part of a rally after morning Friday prayers. There were thousands in the streets saying we are united against ISIS and united behind our martyr, their hero, the Jordanian pilot who was burned alive, Chris.
Shepard Smith reporting live from the Jordanian capital of Amman. Shepard, thanks for that. Talks over Ukraine between the leaders of France and Germany and Russian President Vladimir Putin have ended. No word on what, if anything, was accomplished. A Putin spokesman says the three will get together on the phone Sunday, along with Ukraine's president. The head of the House Select Committee on Benghazi says interviews with State Department personnel will begin as soon as next week and run through April. Congressman Trey Gowdy says that will be followed by another series of interviews with high-ranking current and former officials, such as former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta and former CIA Chief David Petraeus. Gowdy said previously he will also call former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. The Army is doing an about-face on its refusal to give Purple Hearts to the victims of the Fort Hood massacre back in 2009. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us why and what it means.
More than 5 years after the Fort Hood massacre, where 13 were shot dead and more than 30 injured, the Army says the attack was terrorism and not workplace violence, as the Defense Department first claimed.
I'm calling on behalf of the Adjutant General of the Army. Wanted to get some information to you.
This morning, the Army started calling the Fort Hood survivors and families to begin the enrollment process. Among the Purple Heart recipients, Sean Manning, who first spoke to Fox News about the attack where he was shot 6 times by then Major Nidal Hassan.
I saw everybody, screaming, and I saw the blood all over and the blood in my chest.
Reached by phone today, Manning said he is grateful the Army is no longer in denial.
Decided it is an act of terrorism, and that represents that, the sacrifice that these guys made was something that was no different than if they're in Iraq or Afghanistan.
New language in the defense budget required the Army to consider whether the perpetrator, Hassan, was in contact with or inspired by a foreign terrorist group. Hassan emailed the senior al-Qaeda figure, American Anwar al-Awlaki, prior to the shooting. A lawyer for some of the families emphasized the benefits will now be a lifeline after the administration had thrown up blocks to prevent the Purple Heart designation.
They wanted this to be swept under the rug. For these people, many of whom have been struggling mightily since this event took place and since they've been given the back of the hand by their own government.
The Army said in a statement today the Purple Heart's strict eligibility criteria had prevented the military from recognizing the victims any sooner. The Secretary of the Army said, quote, "It's an appropriate recognition of their service and sacrifice." Chris.
More on this with the panel. Catherine, thank you. Up next, why millions of Americans may get a nasty tax bill thanks to Obamacare. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in St. Louis, where a boy's mother, grandmother, and aunt are facing kidnapping charges after staging an abduction to scare the 6-year-old for being too nice to strangers. Police say they threatened the boy with a gun, took him to a basement, removed his pants, and say he could be sold into sex slavery. The boy told school officials, and they called police. Fox 5 in New York, where an American Airlines flight attendant has been arrested after 700 pounds of coins intended for UNICEF were found in his car. Police say Marco Costa collected the money from passengers, supposedly to give to charity. And this is a live look at Tampa from Fox 13. The big story there tonight is a really big baby. Maxandra Ford has given birth to a healthy 14.1-pound boy. Baby Avery set a new hospital record. His mom says she didn't even realize she was pregnant until a few weeks ago. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.